welcome to another episode of Two Rivers Tuesday. We are back. I'm Maggie Colella here again with John Teague. How are you, John?
I'm great. We're wearing the same clothes that we were wearing when we recorded session one
Yes.
of this special summer podcast. Don't you have anything else to wear, Maggie?
I just love the shirt.
Yeah. And here's what's funny, because we're recording several different episodes on the same day, and Maggie made the point that I will often wear the same thing in our podcasts, even when we are recording them on different weeks, because I have sort of a limited wardrobe. You know, I kind of have the older I get, the more like cool I am with a uniform.
Yes.
Like
You know what you like.
I want to be like Steve Jobs and basically just wear the same thing every day, because it takes the decision out of it, and you find something you like and go with it. I so think that is like a factor of getting older.
I agree. Yeah, I feel like the older people get, the more like stuck in their wardrobe they get, and it never changes.
Yes, that's true. And then I'm thinking about some of the other things that I think are going to happen to me as I get older that have to do with the way I dress, but I'm not going to say them because someone who's listening to this
may do those things now.
They may very well be doing it right now.
They're wearing it this
They
very
are wearing
moment.
it right this moment. So I'm going to leave you to just guess what that is.
That's hilarious. As the lead pastor here, you can enact like a uniform policy in our office.
In our office?
Yeah, I would be so game for that.
You would?
Yeah. It's okay. You don't tell us what to wear.
Yes.
You just say you have to wear the same 2 outfits every time you're in the office, or
Okay.
3.
I don't get to pick the outfits?
Nope. I get to pick, but I only can wear those 3 outfits to work.
Oh, that would be an interesting game to play.
Yes.
Yes. We'll think about that later.
Yes. All right. We're continuing in our summer series, our summer book club. But before we get into that, what else are you reading this summer?
What am I reading this summer? Okay. Well, my rising sophomore daughter has been assigned The Hobbit. Yeah. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So I was really surprised by that. So I have not lost all faith in our educational system.
That's
you know,
amazing.
I think it's going to be great. And so I'm going to read that with her. And then I've got a couple of other like fiction series that I really enjoy. One of them is by an author named C.J. Box, and he writes a series about a game warden out in Wyoming who always ends up like in the midst of solving some kind of mystery. He's a game warden, so it's all about animals and hunters and things like that.
Right
But there's
up your alley.
always some kind of crazy thing that happens out there, and he's right in the middle of it, and it's super fun. So I'm going to be reading that over the summer, and then there is a book by Paul David Tripp called Lead that I'm working through right now on leadership, gospel-centered leadership. Yeah. What about you?
Okay, I just finished Harry Potter, one of the Harry Potter books. And that
Wow.
was great, yes.
Okay.
And then I think next I'm going to start this series called Mark of the Lion. It's by Francine Rivers. And it's like a series. I don't know a whole lot about it. Like, I'm just a few pages in, but I think the idea is she kind of follows the story of some of the like first century Christian martyrs, and helps you understand like what that was like in that time. And it's already been like very eye-opening and interesting. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think maybe my wife has read those. I've
Probably.
heard of that
she
Mark
reads
of the
a lot,
Lion
doesn't
stuff.
she, Katie?
Yeah, she loves like fiction, and I think she's read a lot by Francine Rivers, maybe. So.
Yes. Yeah, I'm excited about that. All right. Well, we as a church family are reading Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer this summer. So if you're jumping into this for the first time, we're kind of taking the book part by part and kind of discussing it on our podcast for a little summer series. So we're going to start in part 2 today. If you're reading along, I hope you're enjoying it, and we'd love to hear what you think about it.
Yeah,
I feel
I'd love to
like
hear that.
your feedback and input and thoughts would definitely add to our conversation. So feel free to reach out to us with your thoughts. But today we're going to be talking about part 2, which is the goal number 1, to be with Jesus. So kind of a recap. Last time we talked about kind of the difference between an apprentice of Jesus and a Christian, and so what it looks like to really follow Jesus. And he argues that one of the first things is to be with Jesus by spending time with him. So he kind of opens this chapter talking about abiding. Will you kind of explain a little bit about what that word is or means or what that looks like? Abiding.
I will.
No.
I'll get to that. But I have another question for you
Okay.
first. Is there someone in your life that just by being with them, you find yourself being changed? Maybe even becoming more like them.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I could think harder and longer on this, but the first person that came to mind was Lauren, my sister. Outside of Jake, who would also be another answer, I spend a lot of time with her, and so I feel like we even like sound similar. A lot of people tell us that, you know, like when you look at us, you can't tell that we're sisters, but when you start hearing us talk, I think we must talk similarly. So I think I talk a lot like her. But spending time around her, I want to be more loving when I'm around her a lot. And I feel like she just helps me be more loving, especially how she treats my children and how she treats her children. Like, because I'm just in the thick of motherhood and three littles and like the chaos that is. But Lauren is so patient and loving and just generous with my girls. And that just makes me want to be better. Like, I'll just tell a little short story. Yesterday, Lauren had a babysitter with her children so that she could come work out with me, and then she was going to go to Target and go do work at a coffee shop. So she like was going to have me time. Like, she was going to be by herself and think her own thoughts and accomplish her own things by herself.
Which is a real gift for a mom.
Exactly. So that was her plan for the day. She comes over and we work out together, and she's like, all right, I'm leaving. And my 4-year-old was like, can I come with you? And Lauren's just like, yes, of course. And I'm like, whoa, Lauren, like, I promise you don't want to take her. Like, that's not going to be what you had in mind for your time today. Like, you're going to a coffee shop to have like quiet, uninterrupted, focused time. Like, I promise this is not what you had in mind. And she's like, no, I would love to take her. And I'm just like stunned by that level of like love and generosity and sacrifice.
You looked like her just as you said that. Like, when you're like, no, I would love to take her. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at Lauren.
There it is. Now. Yes. Yeah. So that is a long answer to your question.
What a beautiful answer though. And what a beautiful compliment to your sister. That's exactly what I was going for when I was asking that question. You know, I think sometimes I like to, it happens whether I like to or not. I pick up on people's things that they say, like their verbal mannerisms, whatever that word is, you know, and like I find myself doing it. So if I spend a lot of time around my friend Nick Feldman, I will find myself saying things that Nick says all the time, like just little things,
Lingo.
You know? Yes. Or my laugh, if I spend a lot of time around Chris Jessen, I will start laughing just like him.
That's funny.
And then when I spend time around like someone who just deeply loves the Lord, not that those men don't, but that perhaps just that are older and wiser and been down the road. I'm thinking about, you know, my friends Karen and Steve Rutledge. And when I spend time with them, I find myself more attentive to what the Lord might be saying in the moment.
Yeah.
And so I so appreciate the time that I have with all those people, you know, because they're shaping me.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the idea here in this section of the goal being to be with Jesus.
Yes.
Like that's the first thing we need to think about, you know, don't just run to the do's and the don'ts, the lists of, you know, Jesus's moral code, you know, like be with Jesus. Jesus called his disciples. Do you remember which gospel it is where it's either John or Mark, but Jesus calls them and then it very explicitly says to be with him. Like he called them to be with him. That's part of following Jesus. Part of being a disciple or an apprentice of Jesus is being with him, because he knows that the more time you spend with him, the more you will become like him.
Yeah, that's so good. That's a beautiful picture to paint. It's like, who else would we want to be more like? Therefore, like, in order to be more like him, we have to spend time with him. And not because it's like a duty, but because it's a delight and it's a joy and an honor to get to spend time with him. Like there's nothing else better.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about this episode. Thanks for that question. That was really helpful. Spending time with Jesus. And one of the ways we do that is by this idea of abiding.
That's right. You asked me that.
So now will you unpack that word for us?
Abide. Is that the Greek word meno? M-E-N-O.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And it has this idea of like making your home in, you know, like Jesus is inviting us to make our home in him, right? To abide in him, to be with him is to abide, to remain. You may have heard it defined, remain, stay. John 15 is a great passage where he's saying, I'm the vine, you're the branches, remain in me. It's abide in me. It's that Greek word. Stay connected to me so that life can flow into you from me.
Yes, yeah. And in the book, he talks about this similar idea of discipleship in part 1, where he says, like, everyone is being discipled by something. It's just a matter of what or who you're being discipled by. Similarly, with abiding, everyone is already abiding in something. You already have this place that you go, this emotional home, this place that you drift, where your mind is going to go when you have that down second. Everyone's already abiding. And so what this book is inviting you into is making your home in Christ, that we would learn to what he calls make God a habit, where you're kind of rewiring your brain to where in all of those down moments when your mind drifts or you have that second, that your mind will automatically go to abiding in Christ. And so I feel like that this aspect of it is one of the most exciting parts of the book for me, and what I feel like I need most is because I so often will maybe have like some time with Jesus in the morning, and then I start my day, and then like toward the end of the day I'm like, oh whoa, like I haven't had a second thought about Jesus. I haven't returned to God. I haven't like abided in him in this whole part of the big chunk of my day. And so what I'm like wanting to lean into is making it a habit for, in even the most chaotic of situations and the longest of days and the busiest of to-do lists, that even on those days that my mind would just continually be drifting back and like re-anchoring to God, no matter what is going on. And so this chapter is a little bit about like how we can create those pathways in our mind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So how do we do that?
How do we do
How do
that?
you do that?
How do I do that? Oh gosh. Well, I should probably start out by saying like, I'm not great at this.
Yeah.
Now you ask my family, who they see me often like sitting alone reading or studying. I'm very much in my head, like thinking about Jesus and about the Bible and how to communicate God's truth to people. That is my calling in life. But I'm not great about just being with Jesus. You know, like I love to study God's word, but he's been inviting me to I think recognize and then sort of begin to change the way I spend time like alone and in the quiet. I'm sensing an invitation from the Lord to be with him more and like study about him maybe a little bit less. Yeah. Or at the very least, like not just study and then get up and go.
Exactly.
You know,
yes,
like
yeah.
I'm pretty good at that. But just sitting with Jesus, that's a challenge for me and my how I'm wired.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm on a similar journey of just like wanting that to continue into all the little moments throughout my day. On page 39 of the book, he's talking about this idea, and he says, what do you return to in your quiet moments? Where do you go to find solace and joy? What would it look like for you to make your home inside God? And he says, to clarify, this is not holding up in a monastery, but about learning to always be in two places at once. And this is this like, I'm like, yes, I want that. Like what you said, where it's just like, okay, how can I'm just picturing myself And listeners, I invite you to like picture, where do you spend most of your day? Maybe it's your work, maybe it's your home. I'm picturing myself like at my house with my 3 kids, like doing all that I need to be doing. And how can I like be with God in those moments? And so he gives some examples. He says, eating your breakfast and being with Jesus, braving public transit for your morning commute and being with Jesus, changing another diaper and being with Jesus, sorting through your inbox yet still being with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of like what I'm like, I want more of that. And I think it starts by maybe finding that, what he calls secret place, and enjoying that in such a way that it like continues to spill out into the rest of your day. Do you think that's one piece of it?
I do. Yeah, let's get to the secret place, that lonely place, or that eremos that Jesus would go to. Let's get to that in just a second. Because where my mind goes as you're reading this is just how, like, where do I go? Where do I return?
Yeah.
Like throughout my day, like, when I'm driving in my truck, or when I'm filling up my giant water bottle that takes forever to fill up at my fridge. You know what I'm doing? You know where I'm returning? Right here, like to this phone in my hand. Like, I literally caught myself the other day filling up my water bottle at the fridge and like stopping because I didn't have my phone. Like, what in the world am I going to do for the next 37 seconds? If I don't have my phone, I just have to stand here while this thing fills up, you know, like, oh my gosh, you know, like think about all the things I can crush and conquer if I just have my phone in my hand, right?
Yes.
Like, how ridiculous is that? Like, I'm clearly like addicted to this thing, and this is a habit that I need to break. So part of this is realizing, like, okay, maybe instead of picking my phone up when I am, you know, whatever my version of changing a diaper is, right? Because there's no more diapers in our house. When I'm driving in my truck, when I'm filling up my water bottle, when I'm waiting in line, returning to Jesus, and perhaps like even with just a prayer of acknowledging his presence. He's with me. He's always with me. He's always with you. Right. So I think just beginning a habit of that. It's like, I do that in the morning. I think the beginning of the day is great. And then it just sort of unravels from there, you know, like, and I've even begun a new habit for me, like part of like this abiding journey, of just before I get out of the bed, I say good morning to the Lord, and I thank him for the day. And I kind of have the same sort of prayer that I pray every morning, just about his love and me needing it, to be filled up with it, you know, because I need to be loved and I need to be reminded, but also so I can love others well, you know? Cause I've just, this is kind of an aside, but one of the reasons I pray that is I've just come to this realization, and even very pointedly recently, I can't make people love Jesus, but I can love Jesus, and I can love them with the love that he gives me, you know. So that's why I need to abide in him. That's why I should be returning to him, maybe instead of my phone every free moment I get, right? Like, there's a quote in here, and maybe I'll let you answer this question while I look for it. Nope, I found it. And then I'll let you talk. But he says, he's quoting someone, and he says, the undirected mind tends toward chaos, and just sort of like that idea of entropy. Like, our minds are immediately going to drift to like worry or what's next, or, you know, anxious thoughts about something coming up. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'll say, am so quick to fill it with
the phone,
sports headlines or news headlines or anything that keeps my mind from, because I'm a little worried about where my mind will go as soon as it has a free moment. I might start worrying about the thing that I've got ahead of me. And when maybe the Lord would invite me, and maybe you, to welcome that anxious thought, and then to like surrender it and submit it to the Lord. God, would you help me with this?
Yes. Yeah. I feel like we are afraid almost, or just feel very uncomfortable with, or don't know what to do with those moments, because like you're saying, like we don't know what kind of thought may come up, or maybe we lazily don't want to deal with the thought that will come up. There could be all sorts of reasons, but I think because of that, we just tend to distract ourselves or make our home in something that is easy or we're comfortable with, because maybe we're afraid to make our home in God almost because of what that might call us into, or I don't know. There could be all sorts of reasons, but I feel like for me, what has been really helpful and what I want to do more of is what kind of I call mental cues, where it's like, okay, think about your day, what a typical day looks like, and think about like maybe one or two things you know you're going to be doing, and kind of tell your brain when you start doing that, let that be a cue, a mental cue to you to go back to God in that moment. So like your water bottle analogy is perfect. It's like, or example, not analogy, is like, you know, you're going to fill up your water bottle. So just tell your brain, when you go to fill up your water bottle, let that be an opportunity that you return to God.
That's great.
For me, I know I'm going to change a diaper. I let that be an opportunity to like find my home in God again. So just think of like, start with two of those things. You know, you're going to be waiting in line. You know, you're going to like finish this task. You know, you're going to drive to work. Like you could think of hundreds of examples, and tell your brain, when you do that thing, let it cue you into returning to God. And I think that's kind of a starting place. And the more we do that, and the more of those cues we have, and the more our mind gets in that habit of returning to God, the more I feel like we will find our home in Him, and even many more moments throughout the day that we didn't even plan for. And it'll just kind of be like become more natural to our brain, because by doing that, we literally can rewire our brains, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, and I think he even talks about that, just kind of like neurons that fire together, wire together.
Yes.
Like he talks about that in this section of the book. That makes me think of another book. So can I, while we're talking about one book, is this like Inception?
Yes.
Like we're talking about one book, I'm gonna recommend another book by I think her name is Tish Warren.
Yes.
And she actually has three names, but I definitely got two of the three there.
Tish Harrison Warren.
Warren.
Warren. Oh,
I think it's Warren. I think he quotes her. He does quote her in this book.
Does.
But she has a book called Liturgy of the Ordinary. And I think there's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on the front cover of it, if I remember correctly, and I'm hungry. But she does just a great job of helping you see how you can return to the Lord in the very ordinary, mundane moments of the day.
Yes.
And I think that book is great for anyone. But if you are a mom with young ones and you find yourself in a lot of those diaper changing moments, you know, and cleaning up toys moments and sitting down to read a book moments, you know, like, I think you would be very encouraged by that.
Yeah.
But she has just different chapters on even like just sitting in traffic and how can that ordinary thing be something that brings you back to the Lord? Yes. Yeah.
Jake, my husband, has started doing where he like refuses to pull out his phone anytime he's waiting in any kind of line.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's such an easy one. It's just like, okay, I can do that, you know, and it's hard. And like when you first start doing it, you feel the angst in your body of like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, what do I do?
Yes.
Like, what thoughts do I have? But like, it's just like amazing to me how far removed we are from even like knowing how to just stand still in a public place and like look at people and like watch what's going on around you and just like be aware of like where your feet are standing, because we just immediately want to enter into this like other world that of our phones that is like constantly calling us, and it just gives us nothing. But it's like the real world where your feet are is worth being in. So just stand there and like see what God has for you in that moment. Yes.
And this is not a podcast about technology, but and I think we've said it in our Two Rivers Tuesday podcast before, but I got this idea from Andy Crouch, who writes a lot about this. And, you know, our phones, the reason that it's so like we're so drawn to them is that it's perfectly curated to be all about us.
Yes.
Like that, it everything that it has done and that it is doing and feeding you is based on your desires, your appetites, the things that draw you in. Like that's what the algorithms are all doing. It's been listening to you and it's doing all those things. So it's all about you.
Yep. And of course we love that.
And we love that. And the world that you're standing in that moment is not tailored to you.
Yes.
By its very nature, you're waiting. No, someone, did not say, hey, let's move everyone out of the way for you.
Yes.
Right? Like you are waiting. And you are not the center of the universe. And we don't want to sit in that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's good. All right. So the book, or this part of the book, Being with Jesus, I kind of think of it broken up into two parts. There's the like moment by moment abiding, where our thoughts are just going back to him when we're waiting in line, when we're filling up our water bottle. There's that. And there's also this other huge component of abiding and being with Jesus, which is what he calls the secret place. And we see this modeled very clearly in Jesus's life, where he's just constantly going to the secret place. And that's where he's spending time with the Father, receiving his love, abiding with him, enjoying him. And so that's what we as followers of Jesus not just like have to do because it's essential to our following him, but we want to do that. Like we want to be with our rabbi in that way and receive his love. And so talk a little bit about the secret place. What does that look like for you? What have you found that like helps you in that? What works, what doesn't work, all of that.
Yeah. I think that, so the secret place is like not just a location, right? Although, it's definitely used that way when it's describing Jesus getting up early in the morning and going to the eremos, the lonely place, to just be with the Lord to pray. So it is a withdrawing and a getting away. And sometimes you can do that, right? Like when you're in the middle of everyone, just being able to be mentally and emotionally present to the Lord. That's kind of what we've been talking about. But there's this other idea of just like really finding a literal place to go and be alone with the Lord. And I think environment really matters for a lot of us, and so that environment may be outside because of the way you're wired. You need to be breathing fresh air. You need to be seeing the maybe the sun rising, or, already in the sky, the blue sky, whatever it may be. I have different times where I have different places that I really enjoy. Sometimes I really enjoy sitting in my office at home with a candle burning, where I can look out my window and I can see, because the sun rises on that side of the house. Other times I like to be sitting outside and on my back porch, because I want to feel the cool morning air, and I just want to be, I enjoy being with God in nature. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I do think we need to know how we're wired, and how we connect with the Lord, and then like find that place.
Yes. And it's particular to your stage of life. So like, I imagine the timing that you can do that is different now that you have teenagers versus when you had babies.
For sure.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So let me speak to kind of what works for me in my stage of life. Is like, I have come to the painful conclusion that in order for this to work, and in order for me to like have this secret place and time with Jesus that I so desperately want and need, I have to unfortunately wake up before my children wake up. And I like for so long wanted to avoid that reality, but I just have had to accept it. And I'm seeing that it's so worth it, but it is just like a dying to myself, because I just want to sleep in. But for me in this stage of life, I have to wake up before them. And even this morning, like I did wake up before they're supposed to wake up, but as it goes, one of them was awake earlier and crying. And so I just had to, this is going to sound so terrible, I knew all her needs were met and that she was safe, but I had to close my door, crank my sound machine up, close her door, and like temporarily not hear the crying, because I needed that time with Jesus. And so I think figuring out, okay, in your stage of life, what sacrifices might be necessary in order for you to have this time, as painful as it may be, and just what's going to work for you. And if it feels overwhelming, start small and try to like build upon it. Like start with 10 minutes and try to get it up to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, like whatever you find that's helpful, and do your best to be distraction free. So again, we're not like a technology podcast, but it does come up a lot.
Yeah.
Do not have your phone with you. Like I feel like that's just like a helpful baseline, is like if you're gonna have this time in the secret place and time with Jesus, you will be so distracted if your phone is with you. So I say like have it as far away from you as possible.
Yeah, and I just would say to maybe those who aren't in that kind of place where you're at, like, so the other day I spent some of my lunchtime walking over at Enterprise, over at the nature center, just walking on the nature trails. And I went over there thinking I'm going to listen to a podcast and, like stimulate my brain. And then like I ran out of service and I couldn't listen to anything anymore. And then I was just stuck there, like walking with Jesus. And I began to just use that time to pray.
Yes.
And that was a great little moment in my day that kind of like filled my battery, just spending time with him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All right, well, in closing, I'm going to kind of read this quote that I thought was the best quote in the whole chapter. And this just kind of paints a picture of kind of this like cultural lie we've bought into and maybe what Jesus is inviting us into. So he says, this is on page 55 for those who have the book. For years, when I read about monks and nuns who gave up a quote-unquote normal life to do little else besides pray, I'd think they were a little crazy. For the record, some of them were, and some more than a little. But what if we're the ones who are unhinged? We would rather binge Netflix or go shopping or play fantasy football than commune with loving. Side note, loving is kind of a name for God. He said, who would rather give the vast majority of our time to slaving away for some job that will chew us up and spit us out the moment we're no longer useful to the bottom line. Who choose to spend hours every day on our phones, yet claim we don't have time for God. What if we're the ones who have lost touch with reality, who are wasting our lives on trivial things? Is your heart waking up yet? Is there a flame down in your soul starting to burn with desire for friendship with Jesus? If so, let me offer you hope. You can take hold of the life that is truly life, the life Jesus died to make possible. Here's a good place to start. Go and find what Jesus called the secret place. So I just love this quote because it just paints a picture to me of like, oh my gosh, like I'm wasting my time so often choosing those other things instead of spending time abiding with God and receiving his love and loving him in return. So I just feel like, listeners, this is a good just invite for all of us, is like find that secret place, find those cues throughout your day where you can find your home in God again and again. And I'm excited to see the fruit that comes from that as our church family starts to lean into that more and more.
Yeah, what a great quote. Great way to close this.
All right, well, thanks for listening, and we'll be back in a few weeks for part 3.
See ya.